Theme song for the Gear Podcast. How you going, Uncle Leon? What's going on, buddy?
Pretty good, mate. I'm super stoked because today we have an absolute legend of the guitar and of Australian music, the one and only Brett Garsed. How are you, Brett? Thanks for joining us.
I'm great. Thanks, lads. Thanks for having me.
Now, the burning question, Brett, before we do this, we always like to just kind of have a bit of preamble on here. And we were chatting before you jumped on. You're obviously a Victorian boy originally. So we're trying to guess which footy team you follow.
The age-old question. Look, I started off as a young child. I started off as an Essendon supporter.
Okay.
Oh.
Back in the days of Alan Noonan, if you can believe that, because I'm an old mongrel. And then when I got to primary school, it might have been, I think it was primary school, I was threatened with bodily violence if I didn't barrack for Collingwood, so I switched it. I'm ashamed to admit I defected to Collingwood.
Uh-huh.
Mate, Troy called it.
And now I don't. I bear allegiance to no one.
Oh, fair enough.
I just watch. It's beautiful because it saves me all the anxiety on grand final day. I can just watch it and just observe the magnificence of these finely tuned physical specimens beating the crap out of each other. And
Absolutely.
Yep.
they're amazing to watch. I mean, man, it's an art form watching the way they handle that game. I mean, they are the best of the best. So there you go.
I think we've both got into it a lot more in the last maybe 5 years, haven't we? So it's just as a little bit of a break from guitar because guitar and guitar YouTube gets a bit sick and tired. I'll get a bit sick and tired of it. But
when I was a kid, growing up in a small country town around here, which is what I did, if you weren't a member of the footy team, you were essentially ostracised from society. I mean, you had no societal connection, and I did try my best to get on the footy team, but I was a small kid. And I had a big heart, but they just wouldn't give me a game because I wasn't physically imposing. And so I sort of gave up on it. And then it wasn't long after that, I discovered this thing, and I didn't care.
Yeah.
So I was so addicted to the guitar and to music. And then my cousins and I formed this band. And then the funny thing is, I would occasionally go to the local footy games when I was about 13 to watch my friends all play, and the coach would come running up saying, "Did you bring a kit? We need players." So I actually ended up playing a couple of games, and that was all right. I fulfilled my footy fantasy as a kid, but
where'd they play
you? I played in Malton, which is a little town not far from here.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Notoriously tough team too, so I was lucky I got out of it with no broken bones or anything like that. So
exactly, I would say probably across the halfback flank. That's the guitar player position to me. I used to play halfback when I played footy, and same thing. If you're ready to break your own body for the team, you sit on a flank, and then let the superstars get in around it.
Sorry, I misinterpreted the question. I thought you meant what?
That's okay.
Locally. But on the field, who knows? Probably a halfback flank or something like that, where they just stuck me there and thought, well, if he dies, he dies.
Yeah. So, no, I feel the same because I only played one season when I was in year 7, and I was I still am awful at running. So they stuck me in the back pocket, and until my entire life, I've just thought, okay, well, the back pocket must be the easiest position and the most unimportant position because that's where they put me. But as I've gotten older, big fan of backman, so it's just it's kind of come full circle, really.
It's a brutal game, man, and for guitar players, bad news. I mean, all my friends played it, knee reconstructions, like deformed fingers, like we have no business going near football. So that's just
Well, the thing you just catch the thing
in general.
Oh, it's too hard. Anyway, we all made the right choice.
From that. You transition obviously from we're getting into the Reader's Digest version of I guess your career. So starting a band in a small country town, I've always wanted to know, what was it? Are we talking like in the back shed, just infinite volume, smashing stuff out? What were you guys playing? What were you into?
No, it sort of started gradually, and you can't see it. It's on the wall up there. It was the guitar that I found under my brother's bed. And he had to take over the family farm when he was about 16 because my father passed away quite early.
Far out.
Brother John took over the farm as a young boy and did a magnificent job. So he had no more time for guitar. So I think I was about 11 when I got that thing out and I started looking at it. And my brother-in-law used to play it, so it was already in tune. And there was a book of chord things, and he showed me how to read a chord book where he said, circle over the string, that's open. X over the string, don't play it. Everything else, shove your fingers where the numbers tell you to. And so I started sort of trying to make things work. And I remember I used to get it out and I'd look at it, and my mum would be watching TV and I'd just have the guitar out and then I'd be looking at it. And one day I got it out and I was sort of mucking about on it. And I think I accidentally did this. I went like that. And I went, oh, this is exciting. You know, like, I mean, it wasn't plugged in or anything, but it was sort of a semi-acoustic thing. So at least I had a bit of volume. And I realized, like, oh, you go this way, they go up. That way they go down. And I think I actually made a song up on the open strings where I came up with that was my first song. So there you go.
That's fantastic. That reminds me of, I had again, was lucky to have guitars in the house, but I had like a little Zoom multi-effects and it had this like step phaser thing in it. And, I remember just grabbing it and doing like, and this thing's going, blah, 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 blah. I was like, oh, this sounds incredible. Like, why wouldn't you want to play the guitar? It's so straightforward. And I often think guitar is one of those instruments, unlike maybe a violin, where you don't have to spend the first 4 years of the instrument learning how to hold it. The buy-in to make cool sounds is really low. And then there's just like so many plateaus. And if you sort of want to like really, really, push yourself, then you start hearing, I don't know, but for me it was like Stevie Ray Vaughan, Ritchie Blackmore, all this stuff that my dad listened to, but then hearing the Shrapnel Records era stuff where it was like, oh, I didn't realize that that's where you could push the instrument. So what was I'm curious for you at the time, what was, I guess, what was the gold standard, in terms of like guitar music for you growing up?
Well, I kind of came in right at the ground level with Blackmore because I remember it pretty vividly. I think I was starting to it was before I'd taken lessons. It was even before I'd actually tackled the guitar as an instrument. And I remember we were having sort of a barbecue family day at my brother's place, which was the original farm we used to live on, and then my mother and sister and I moved just up the road, really. And he puts on Deep Purple in rock, and Speed King comes on, that intro, which is just basically Richie shredding and the band going mad. And I said, what is this? And he said, that's Deep Purple. He said, they're the loudest band in the world. And they actually sounded like it. And I thought, I'm in. It's a sale. I'm in. And that was it. That was the first album I bought with my own money, was Deep Purple in rock. And that was the quest, just to try and get my skills to the level where I could just even assimilate what Richie was doing. And, he was a great person to sort of jump in at the ground level on, because he played a lot of blues. He played simple riffs, which were brilliant. And yet there was this other level, like a harmonic and technical level to his playing that was light years ahead of its time. I was talking with a friend of mine the other day about that bridge between, say, Jimi Hendrix and the Van Halen. And yet there's all these markers in the middle, like Richie, Alvin Lee, Jeff Beck would fall in there. Brian May, I would say, like it was an era where they were taking the blues and adding extra harmony to it and a level of technical sophistication, and then Eddie popped out, and it's and he sort of is a product of all that. If you throw Alan Holdsworth into the mix too, because he was like a hybrid of Clapton and Holdsworth.
Yeah. I'm so glad you mentioned Alvin Lee, because one of my earliest memories, my dad loved 10 Years After, a guitar player. And I still remember him putting on like the Woodstock movie, when I was quite young, and just him going, like, listen to this guy. And it wasn't so much that he was playing fast. It was like the intensity with which he was playing that I think someone like a Van Halen, or, I was chatting to someone over the weekend. We were talking about, say like Yngwie or Paul Gilbert, as the cat is clearly agreeing with me in the background. That like just, the thing that got me was just like the ferocity of what was happening with everything. And Blackmore had that, right?
Yeah. Viciousness. And the Alvin Lee thing, my brother had, cars used to have 8-track players in them. Like, you ever an 8-track player? Like a big cartridge.
Yep.
Way bigger than about 4 times the size of a cassette. my brother was he was very, very supremely cool guy. He was like my hero, and he always had the cool cars. He had a Phase 1 GT and then a Phase 3 GT, if you can believe that. Yeah. Many drives in that Phase 3 at 120 miles an hour. It was a goer. But that's what had the 8-track in it, and he had the 8-track cassettes of the Woodstock movie. And I just ate that thing up, man. I just listened. It was all Hendrix at the end, 10 years after, and Santana, and everything else I'd kind of get through just to get to those songs. But Going Home was the bomb. I mean, we used to play that in our pub band. I think I was about 15 when I could actually play that thing. And the coolest thing about that song is that repetitive thing he does in the middle, which is the actual note. I can't even play it anymore. The notes are that. Remember that thing?
Yep.
And I used to kind of hybrid pick it. Back then I was doing it like it was something like that. But I was better at it back then than I am now. I haven't played that pick in 40 years. But Alvin sweep picks it. You can see it in the movie. And I remember I bought another album by 10 years after. I think it's called Absolutely Live, just a double live thing. And there's a great song on there called Can't Keep From Crying Sometimes. It's amazing. And he does these interludes where he's a great country player, jazz player. Does it George Benson octaves as well as George Benson. Just he's brilliant. One of the most underrated players in history for sure.
Yeah, I read an interview with him. I think it must have been not long after he passed away, where it was sort of one of those, an old guitar player magazine or something, where he was saying, doing the British blues circuit was this sort of like very serious thing where like the blues connoisseurs would come out and they'd like grade you on your performance afterwards. And he said he like really actively rebelled against that, where he was like, well, it's you meant to do your own thing with it. So he's like, the more people that told me that like, oh, that's not how BB King does it, or that's not how Muddy Waters does it, he'd be like, great, I'm going to do it less like that. We're going to do it faster. We're going to do rock and roll, but we're also going to do traditional blues. So all those things being chucked in, and of course it's really interesting. Obviously, anyone who's familiar with your work, the hybrid picking thing, was that something that just was obvious that you should do, or was it something where you were like, oh, hey, there's this technique called hybrid picking? I can't imagine at the time it was like a codified practice, right?
It just happened, and it definitely wasn't called hybrid picking. If they had a name for it, it was chicken picking.
Yeah, right.
And I just looked down one day and this middle finger was playing along with the pick, like I was doing that, and this finger was joining in, and I went, okay, so this is happening.
Yeah.
And I was trying to learn acoustic tunes, and I'd read in an interview that Jimmy Page used his pick and fingers to play acoustic songs. So I thought, okay, well, I'll try that. And so a friend of mine gave me a Leo Kottke record, and I'm trying to work Leo Kottke tunes doing that. It was brutal. And actually one of the first things I ever tried to really finger pick was my brother bought the Sabbath Bloody Sabbath album, which I just loved. I'd listen to that back to front. And the last song called Spiral Architect, beautiful tune.
Yep.
And Tony Iommi does an untitled, just acoustic intro to it, and it's a beautiful piece of music. It's
beautiful.
It's a really lovely piece of music, and I thought I've got to learn it. So I sat down, figured out the notes, and it was because I'm using my pick and my other three fingers. It was, come on, man, come on, let's go,
Yeah.
I just thought, okay, well, I just got to practice harder to get this guy to work. And I didn't realize Tony probably used classical technique. I think he's probably quite a fine classical player. And then years later, I did study a bit of classical for about a year with a great teacher in a town called Bendigo named Don Charlton. And I really loved that way of either playing, arpeggiating a chord with the rolling fingers, or actually just playing it as like without having to strum the chords. I love that sound. Yep. Later on, when I picked up the pick again, it was, or like that. So I really dug that it felt good, it felt right. So
Yeah.
Without even realising it, I was working on hybrid picking as it would later become known, but I didn't know it. I was just playing the guitar.
I imagine it's. I find it really interesting speaking, especially to even for people like Troy and I are in our mid-30s, right? So for a large part of our childhood, like I didn't have a computer in our family home until I was in high school, and then it was dial-up internet. So there was a lot of just like no enforced orthodoxy with stuff, you know. If like for me, it was a lot of like kicking the football to myself, running around my front yard, commentating, thinking it's the West Coast Eagles in 1992. And it's like, well, you can just do that on the guitar. Like you can pretend you're Richie Blackmore and try to imitate a bunch of sounds. You've never seen a video of how he does it. So I don't know how so much of what he does. And I was listening to some Rainbow recently, and like, it never occurred to me how much slide he was playing in like the mid-70s.
Oh, great slide.
Which obviously ties back into, you know, getting to watch you play, like when you were doing a lot of the Jeff Beck stuff, like the hybrid picking thing as one thing. How did the slide thing begin? Was that just a thing for you where it was like, well, it's another part of guitar? And I imagine, again, if it's something you've just picked up, being able to do it like on a standard tuned guitar without a weird action is one of the...
Back then, well, you know, back then it was, we're talking the dark ages here, like we're talking the 70s. So, I mean, that's why I didn't know that you could play with a thumb pick. I didn't know there was such a thing as a thumb pick. I didn't know people could play with their thumbs. I thought there was a flat, because that was given to me the day I took it. And you don't know something until you really see it sometimes. It's hard to figure it out. And the slide guitar thing, we would watch Countdown, and then every now and then there was a ABC show. I think it was called Flashes, that played in the afternoon when I got home from school. And then there was, later on, there was the Old Grey Whistle Test from England.
Right, yep.
That was it as far as what you might get to actually see on television. Countdown was the big one. So Little River Band were on there, and Rick Formosa, who lives in Ballarat, which is about an hour that way. I'm still threatening to hook up with Rick. They had this great song called "Every Day of My Life," and what? I think it was in D, and it was what was it? That was kind of the melody to it, and of course Rick's playing it. He had the slide on, excuse me, his third finger, and I thought, well, that looks great. I mean, I got to have a crack at that, so. Into the local music store after school, grab a slide and a chrome one. And, of course, it's a disaster. I come home and it's awful. Everything's screaming and I can't play anything. I can't do a thing with it. So it's like, back on the table. And I was talking to my good mate, Glenn Quill, who at that time was about, Quilly was probably about 10 years older than me, I think. And I would go to him for advice because he didn't know a great deal more about the guitar or how to play it than me, but he certainly knew a lot more about music in general. And he said, no. He said, look, go and buy like a Les Paul copy or something for $100. And he said, tune it to open E or open A and then do that. He said, at least then you can just hold the slide across the fret and at least everything will sound good, and then you can learn how to control the thing. And he was dead right. So that's exactly what I did. Right. Very interesting. Before I did that, the real key, though, was that show Flashes, and Joe Walsh is on there doing a live version of Rocky Mountain Way, and that rekindled my interest in wanting to learn slide. And Joe puts it on his second finger. He's one of the few people in the world to do it. Like, it's very. I didn't see many people do it. You see more now, but back when I was sort of taking notice of it, there was Bonnie Raitt, Jeff Beck, Joe Walsh, and then me. And hardly anybody else I ever saw. They mainly stuck it on little finger or third finger. Dave Hole from WA sticks it on his first finger, but he's a complete anomaly from another planet. So he's unique. But I did that, and then I developed enough control to where I could go back to standard tuning and actually keep things quiet and manage it. And I remember I really missed the classic Joe Walsh lick, which is which of course if you're in open E is just straight across the fret. And I went, oh man, I don't get to do that anymore. And I went, would it work? And I just went, okay, problem solved. On with my life.
Yeah.
You know?
That to me is one of the wonders of the guitar world. Because I remember reading about it in maybe like Australian Guitar Magazine or something when I was about 15 or 16, and maybe a similar experience to you where it's like, great, there's a slide. It was probably like a brass slide or something. I think I've got it on my pinky, and I'm like, nah. Throw that in the bin. That's never going to happen. This is like freak show stuff. If you had a couple of words of advice with anyone, like say for myself, who is a terrible slide player, to develop that, like I notice you're using a glass slide, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm just going to this is going to be my entire weekend is like trying to do that. Do you find
I've never owned a slide before.
Touch.
I might go buy one today after we do this. So go on.
Yeah. How... I know there's obviously, so there's what you're doing with the slide and how hard you're not pressing, I guess. Obviously watching guys like, if I watch Derek Trucks or Sonny Landreth or something like that, the muting technique with the right hand, super important. How do you approach the muting technique?
By any means necessary. That's kind of it, really. That's sort of where slide's at. And it's funny, like I saw Rick Beato recently interview Warren Haynes, who plays in standard tuning as well. And it was beautiful. He said, what's the action like on your guitars? And Warren just sort of looked at him and said, not high enough for slide and too high for everything else. Oh, I feel your pain, my brother. It's just nothing but a compromise. But the muting is quite literally any means necessary. Like I've watched a lot of Derek, and Derek doesn't use a pick, and neither does Sonny. And I'm wondering if a lot of their low string muting comes from the thumb.
Right.
And for me, it's the heel of this hand. It just kind of drapes itself across there. And it'll even go as far as trying to cover that third string. A lot of the top strings, if I'm playing on the high E like this, I'm sort of trying to keep everything quiet. This isn't actually my slide sound. Actually, it's a bit fatter. And I'm sort of trying to keep everything quiet with the heel there. When I go to the second string, actually, you know what? Hang on a minute. Let's get tricky.
Yeah.
Does that work?
Hey. Oh, look at this. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I've dropped my pick. It's a disaster. Brody?
Seeing as, before you do this as well, are you doing like the Lowell George style thing with like some compression or something on your slide sound, or are you just raw dogging it?
No, raw dogging it. Yeah, it's just the sound. The only other sound I have is just a bit darker, that's all. And I try to keep... And I sort of roll the volume back a bit so you get a bit of that darkness coming out, because I don't have a treble bleed on this guitar. Not yet. Anyway.
Nice.
But yeah, when I go to the second string, say, the heel still mutes the low stuff, but you can see the third finger is muting this guy. So.
Awesome.
And then now it's these two muting that thing. And
yeah. All right. So while we've got this view, I was just one of my longtime students I had this morning was asking me what I was doing for the rest of the day, and I mentioned that we'd be doing this call. So he's an American. He was like, "Oh, I know that name, but like, what's he done?" I was like, "Right, you need to hear the song, and you need to hear the lick." So. The lick in Two Strong Hearts, I know you've explained this a million times, but this particularly is for our friend Ben Wilson. This goes out to him. The ending, it's almost like sweet picking slide, right?
I'll go back to the other camera just for the moment while I'm yakking. But the weirdest thing about that solo is that was a long time ago. That was like we did that album in.
86?
87, I think. 87, yeah. I think it was Whispering Jack was 86. I'm pretty sure Age of Reason was 87.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember Ross Fraser and I talked about it recently, and he said, well, we're sitting there. Maybe we tried some other solos. I can't remember. But he said he seemed to remember just saying, what about a slide solo? And I went, okay. So I'd forgotten I even played slide. I'd never played slide with John up until that point, and I just sort of grabbed it out of the bag. And I think I did 3 takes, and I got a suspicion that ending is buttoned on from another take.
Right.
And I have no recollection of even playing it, but I know it was pretty much about 3 takes completely improvised, and that was what we got. And I had to go back and actually relearn that ending. It was like a one-shot deal. I've probably never played it before or since. So wild. You know?
Oh man, it's. I
can kind of sort of remember it. It's been a long time since I've played Two Strong Hearts, but I'll give it. I'll crash and burn here for everybody.
Yeah. Look at this.
For the cause, you know. Hang on, sorry. I use the Sonny Landreth technique with my finger there, but I don't do that.
Oh man. This is
yeah.
just foundational to me. I was saying this at the guitar show on the weekend, right? Where, you know, growing up as a kid in Australia, like that song on the radio, a summer day, you're having a picnic with like your family in a park somewhere, and that just comes on. It's like so burned into like the synapses of my brain that actually seeing you do it is always like, I can't believe that's how those sounds are made. You know, it's amazing. Like, thank you for sharing that. It's amazing to have that in the flesh.
I told you at the guitar show, I was talking to a guy, and it was recently, like 2019 or something. We're on Red Hot Summer or something, and chatting to a guy after the gig, and he said, you know, I play that song in a cover band, and I've played it for a long time, and tonight I've realised it's a slide solo. He never knew it was a slide solo. I think I've got to do myself a disservice there sometimes, because a lot of times people don't really pick my slide playing as slide playing, and maybe it's because I never really do. You know, I don't go. I don't really do that. You know, that's what I always loved. David Lindley. He's one of my favourite slide players, and I used to play with Jackson Brown, and I love the fact that there was slide all the way through Jackson's tunes, but they are not blues songs, and he was playing very non-blues slide. It's just he's just great.
I'm sure you've told this story a million times, but obviously for all the Aussies watching, and a lot of non-Aussies would be aware of your work with Johnny Farnham. How did that gig happen? How do you go from country town in Victoria, jamming with your friends and cousins, maybe playing the odd game of footy here and there as an emergency, to basically being on the biggest Australian album of all time? What was the if you can give us a quick run through of like, how did you initially get the gig, and then what was it like being a part of that, Whispering Jack, Age of Reason, obviously Ginormo Dome shows and all that kind of thing. The band as well was fantastic. Take us through some guitar archaeology.
Well, it's John Farnham for a start, so no more Johnny. That's important, because my brother, when my brother's name was John, and when he was 16, we used to call him Johnny, and I came out and said to my mother, "Where's Johnny?" And she said, "Well, he's out the back, but he'd like you to call him John now. He's turned 16." And I went, "Okay, he's John." And a lot of people, they refused to call him John. They just kept calling him Johnny. And
that's the Australian way, right?
I took offence to that. It's like someone's name is very important. If they tell you that's their name, then you got to stick to it. So, but anyway, I was just in my pub band with my cousin for 10 years. I mean, we formed that. We did our first gig when I was 13, and that was all going along. And I always wanted to be a professional musician, and my bar was set really low. I just thought, if I can just get a gig in a cover band in Melbourne that works, I'll be happy. I mean, I didn't know anything other than playing covers anyway. I would have been totally happy with that. And I was a plumber at that time. I did a plumbing apprenticeship and kept doing that. So I thought, anything's got to be better than plumbing. Like even plumbers tell me it's got to be better than plumbing. But so I started. I think it was, when was it? Well, 1985, I guess, early '85. I started doing little demos on this little Fostex 4-track cassette player I got. And I got this Sonics yearbook. Sonics, you remember Sonics magazine? You'd be too young to even remember that, I think.
No.
Yeah, it's like a trade magazine that used to come out, and every year they'd do a yearbook, which is why it's called a yearbook, I guess. And in it they'd put addresses of companies, record companies, management companies. It was brilliant. And so I got hold of one of those, and I just thought, I'm going to send cassettes and letters to as many people as I can. And that's what I did. Handwrote letters, made cassettes, shoved them in bags, took them to the post office. And the letter was just like, "Dear whoever, I'm just a young guitar player from up in country Victoria looking to get a gig. And if you give me any help, let me know." All the record companies pretty much said unsolicited material and just sent them back, which is fair enough. I didn't know any better. I did get contacted by another management company, and they sort of mucked me around a bit and then just sort of ghosted me. And then I got the letter from Glenn Wheatley, God bless him. And it just said, "Dear Brett, I just got your tape, please call me." And I just showed it to my mum and said, "That's got to be good, right? It's pretty short, but it's good." It's in a frame on the wall now. So,
wow, that's great.
And I called him back, and he said, "Yeah, look, we just got your tape, and it's awesome." He said, "John Farnham's going to put a band together and do a pub tour. Would you like to be in it?" And I just said, "Yeah, hell yeah," because I was already a fan of John's. I'd heard Uncovered, and I was a big fan of Little River Band, and John joined LRB, and so I was just absorbing the Net album. That was the big album at the time. And me and my petrolhead friends, we drove all the way up to New South to go to Bathurst to the car race.
Yeah, right.
And that was it was 1982 or something, I think. And that year they decided they were going to hold concerts, and the first band was Little River Band. And so if you bought a ticket to the race, you could go to the gig. So we walked all the way up the mountain and saw the gig. And I remember before I got there, I was thinking, I wonder if John can sing like this live, because he is singing the crap out of these tunes. I mean, stuff in the stratosphere. Like, I'd seen enough metal bands where they either can't cut it, or, here's the microphone, you sing it. It's like getting the crowd to do it, running out of breath and carrying on. And he obliterated the album. He was so much better live. I could tell he was actually holding back in the studio, and live he was just unleashed, and he just let him have it. He was singing shit that I was just like, man, this guy's from another universe. Greatest rock singer I'd ever heard. Like Stevie Wonder met Ronnie James Dio or something, or Robert Plant. Those kind of. But that range and power, like, unbelievable. So the fact that Glenn had asked me to go out on the road with John was just weird. It was just weird that happened. And so I went down to Melbourne and met him at his house. John opened the door. "G'day, mate, how you going?" I couldn't believe it. I almost fell over and went into his lounge room, and him and Ross were working on demos. And Ross said, "Look, we've got this tune, and we think it needs a big guitar solo. You want to have a crack at it?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And so it was Let Me Out. And
great, because I was going to ask you about that, so keep going.
Yeah, I did two takes and really got lucky, just no clangers, just did two really good solos, I remember them to be. But the weird thing is, I remember that the solo was in a very strange key. Like, it ended up being in A flat or something weird, and or F sharp, something strange, a very sort of weird key. And I thought, oh, this is going to be dodgy, but we'll give it a go. And the reason it was in those keys is because the actual song ended up being in A on the demo. It was in A. Like, the version on the album is in F sharp. So it's right. But the version John was singing was in A. So it was like all that stuff. And that line wasn't there, but the key of the song. So he's singing. Ross said, "What did you do with the verses?" And I said, "Well, I don't really know what to do. There's no vocal on it." And John said, "Oh, I'll chuck one on there for you. I'll do one real quick. No props." So I just plugged in a 58 and stood there in his lounge room and sang the song down in one take. And when he got to the chorus, he was singing. A high G like that. Oof. And full voice, knee up, the whole the full Farnham performance in his friggin' lounge room. Probably hadn't even had his cereal yet. Like, it was 11 in the morning, and I'm just sitting there like this, going, "Jesus, I can't believe this is actually happening in front of me." And then I don't know what I tried to play in the verses. Not much, I don't think. I was kind of shell shocked at what had just transpired. So we went out and did this tour, and this was just before Christmas of 1985. So he was still in Little River Band. We hadn't done Whispering Jack yet. I was before that.
Right.
And the band was Sam C., David Hirschfelder, Derek Polici on drums, Nicky Nichols doing BVs, and Bruno De Stanislao playing bass. And Sam C. was the other guitar player. And I was like, oh, thank God they've got a pro in there. I was so glad. I was, crapping myself thinking, if I'm the only guitar player, I'm a 21-year-old guy that's been in a pub band in Castlemaine his whole life. I'm a little underqualified for this, but thank God Sam was there, holding the fort. So, and it was just awesome, man. We went out and we were playing Black Knight. We played Leg,
awesome.
CP Top. Nikki sang Whole Lot of Love. It was just hilarious. It was so much fun.
So there's the live album, I think, from the mid-90s, late 90s, like a triple live thing. And I've listened to it a lot, but you guys play a lot of those. It's like, I remember someone sending it to me and be like, yeah, hey, you have to hear, if you haven't heard this already, it's like, Black Dog, Legs. And I mean, the band's just killer.
That's the Whispering Jack band, though. That's not.
Yeah, right.
Band, but yeah, we kept Legs in the set for a long time. Black Dog we did in 1994. That was a ways later when Stuart Fraser was.
Man, I heard that a long time ago now, 15 years ago, and it was like, wow. Because you kind of forget, like, with the stuff that we like, the 80s metal, you kind of don't think about him in that category, and then it's kind of eye-opening. I mean, this guy's probably the best singer of all time.
Well, when you look at it in terms of power, range, and then consistency. Like I back in the early days of the pub days of Whispering Jack, we did 16 gigs in a row with drives in between every single one, like hire car drives. Some of them 5-6 hour drives. So get up, get in the car, drive to the gig, do the gig, rinse, wash, rinse, repeat. You know what I mean? 16 in a row, and his voice never failed him ever. And you got guys walking around, the pipes, they're wearing their scarf and everything. But I shouldn't be making fun of that sort of thing because they're human. John is not human. I mean, he's not of this world. I mean,
that's incredible.
I've never seen or heard anything quite like it.
Yeah, I remember.
What were you using at the time, gear-wise? I'm curious because it's there was obviously. We live in like a golden age of guitar gear now, but that would have been the era of, hey, stuff's changing pretty rapidly, right?
Let me try and do this. Hang on a second.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Now let me see if I can get the camera to focus on.
Oh, look at that.
Is that a late 70s, like a 70?
Come on, make it.
Oh, no, it's Plexi.
No, it's not going to do it. It's, that's me in my lounge room, Mum's lounge room at about, I think I was about 17 in that photo.
The wall, like the pattern on the wall, that's an artifact. Right? That's amazing. Yeah.
It's that's a 1970, and that's the year it was built because I looked at the bit of paper on the inside of a 1970 Marshall Super Lead.
Nice.
And I just started my apprenticeship and I had enough money and it was like, right, we're going full Richie. I mean, the Strat, which is just sitting over there, my mother was, God bless her, she bought me that when I was 13. And,
amazing.
It was $650 in 1975 or 1976, which my cousin and I just recently figured out that was about 3.5, nearly 4K back then.
Yeah.
So she basically, but I told her I'd never quit and I never did. So I was good. I was good to my word.
Yep. Yeah.
And then I thought, well, I got the Strat. The next thing is the Marshall. So there was a place down in Frankston, which is still there, called Guitar Village near Melbourne.
Oh, yep.
And I don't know why I contacted them. I still don't know why. Maybe I saw them in the paper or something. But I contacted them and said, I'm looking for a Marshall. So my brother drives me down there. And the first Marshall I got was wild. It was a 50-watt head, but it had the old Art Deco kind of decal on it. It was really old. Like, I mean, we're talking 60s.
Yeah.
That thing would have been, if I'd kept that thing, it would have been worth, I could have bought a car with it today, probably.
Yep.
But it wasn't right. It didn't have enough gain. And I had the bottom cab, which was the black 412. And I thought, I need a stack and I need a bigger round. I need a 100-watter, So I went back down there and they said, yeah, here's one. They gave me the Super Lead and that cab, which turned out it was the matching cab.
All right.
Of the head and
awesome.
The cab. Someone had written stuff on it with yellow paint or something. And you couldn't see it in the photo, but on top of the amp, I'd sent all the way to America for it. It was this box called the Altair Power Attenuator. And it was Power Soak. It was like the Power Soak long before Rockman built it.
Yeah, right.
Years before they built that thing. And I just saw it in Guitar Player magazine back in the 70s and went, I need this thing. I know I do. And I just sent away for it, and 6 months later it turned up. And it was perfect. You could run the amp on about 8 and just control the output level with the Altair, because what you just ran out of the amp into that, and then out of that into the speaker cab, and it worked great.
Yeah, and amazing.
It worked great like that until I blew the amp up because I was using a guitar cable and not a speaker cable because no one told me. And
how would you know?
But it wasn't necessarily my fault, because some rocket scientist had put a 5 amp fuse in the Marshall, so I mean it would have blown up regardless. But I changed the transformer and then put when I got it back. Before that, I was using the bright channel, and it was great. And then after that, I was using the dull channel, and that was much better with the new transformer in it. And Eddie had just happened. Eddie Van Halen had just come out, and I thought, I got to get more gain. So I rang up the guys at Frankston again, and I said, what do you got? And they said, yeah, come down, we'll hook you up. So I go down there. It's like a 3-hour drive, you've got to bear in mind. Yeah. So my poor brother drives me down to Melbourne again. And they just give me a Dodd preamp, and it's not the one Ingvar used. Everyone says, the one Ingvar used. And I go, no, before that, it's like a sort of a silver, weird sort of grey, bluey colour. And it's got no button on it, no on-off switch, just a knob that says gain. And it's clean boost. It doesn't give you distortion. It just boosts signal. Mm-hmm. And when I stuck that into the Marshall, it basically turned the Strat into a Les Paul. And the other thing I got, one of my buddies that was doing the plumbing apprenticeship was also a muso, and he said, can you use this? And he gave me this thing, and it was an impedance booster. It had a jack plug on one end and this big cylinder on it, and you plugged like a jack mic cable into it to give it more impedance and more level over long cables. Back in the old days before Canon plugs for mic cables, right? Mm-hmm. And I thought, I wonder what it would do to the guitar. So I stuck it into the Marshall, and it took all the woolly low end and just focused it. And I went, job done. That's it.
Yeah, wow.
I listened to old cassettes, and I go, dude, if I could get a sound like that now, I'd be absolutely wrapped. It was the greatest guitar sound I'd ever heard. It was the sound.
Yeah,
and
that's so cool.
When I was about 17, I just went, okay, I just got to try and figure out how to play this thing, Yep. I didn't care about sound anymore after that. The only drawback was it hissed like, the ocean coming in, It was like loud. So I used that on that pub tour with John in 1985, and I got many complaints from our sound guy. He said, your amp is so loud, I can hear it hissing at the board. I was using a little Yamaha combo for clean stuff and the Marshall for the dirty stuff, and switching between them, which worked great. But if I put a noise gate before the Dodd preamp, it hated it. Like it just changed completely. So when we did the actual Whispering Jack tour, I used that amp to do the album. And when we did the tour, I used a rented Marshall, which was one of the later 70s Marshalls with the square, standby and on.
That's the one. Yeah, that's what mine is.
Like that guy down there, exactly. Yep. Yeah, that era. Oh. And instead of the Dodd preamp, I bought a Boss heavy metal pedal.
Oh yeah,
and I turned the distortion off, no heavy metal, but just turned the input flat out, and that did the same thing the Boss pedal did. It was just boost signals. So
amazing. There you go.
I could put a Boss noise gate before that, and so problem solved.
Yeah. So there you go.
Do you still have the Marshall?
The HM2 user.
No, I sold the Marshall while I was in the States, and I was broke, and I needed money, and I didn't think much of it at the time. And my good friend here in Bendigo, Steve Harvey, he sold it for me to some guy who then sold it back to a music store, because we were trying to find it about 2019. I went looking for it. Mm-hmm. And the trail went cold because someone walked into the music store in Bendigo and bought it. They bought the amp, the cabinet. They bought the amp, the cabinet, and the Altair power attenuator. And we went, well, we'll never see it again. It's done.
Oh, bummer.
And then,
well, there you go. Maybe the magic of the internet. If someone is watching this and they have Brett's 70s Marshall.
But wait, there's more.
Oh, there's more.
In 2019, I'm about to go rehearse in a Melbourne studio with my friend Lee Bradshaw, and he sends me.
No way.
He sends me a picture on his phone. He says, do you recognize this amp? And I've said, no. And he said, you should. It used to be yours.
All right.
And it's owned by a fantastic guitar player and an engineer who owns his own studio down in Melbourne named Dave Carr. That's Dave, Carr. And he's on Instagram and everything, so everyone should look him at. Dave's a legend. He's fantastic. And he's got my amp, and I've played through it many times.
Ah, awesome.
Oh, that's wicked.
Because I've done a lot of sessions, and I did ask him if he'd sell it back to me, and he said, yeah, probably to pay for my own funeral. So I said, I'll take that as a no, Dave.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, he's not a stupid idiot like I am. He's going to hang on to it. So anyway, that's the story.
That's amazing. I did want to talk about the Let Me Out solo really quickly, because there's, I mean, what you were saying, what was that, 85, 86 that was tracked?
86, yeah.
Yeah, to me,
through that amp, through the Marshall.
Yeah. So there's some tapping, there's a few other things. It's sort of like, you know, there's a lot of, the time.
The only tapping that happens in it, well, there's the harmonics that I do.
Yes.
But that's actually technically not tapping. Like I used to do them a little differently to Eddie.
Yeah.
I would, Eddie would, do the, actually hit the string.
Yep.
That technique that I'm doing there is, I was just touching.
Right. Interesting.
It's like a. I don't actually tap it, so it's a
very, very cool.
So like that. So
yeah. But to me, like the legato, the blistering lick of destruction in there that everyone who hears that song just goes, which I imagine would have been more so at the time. I mean, for me, you know, again, doing the guitarcheology, we're like, who else was doing stuff like this? Obviously, you mentioned Holdsworth, but you know, maybe
I stole that from. So.
Yeah. How did you figure that out? You know, was that again just like you wanted that sound, so you sort of did it? Because especially in Australia as well, you know, it's like maybe Frank Gambale, right? And he was approaching it in a slightly different way.
Well, I mean, the lineage of the whole Holdsworth thing is, I was always a legato player. No one taught me how to play legato.
Yeah.
I just did that.
You just did it. Yep.
And I was reasonably accomplished playing in bars and stuff like that. So I suppose I must have been about 16 or 17, and I read a Frank Zappa interview, and they said, it was something like that, do you consider yourself a good guitar player? And Frank said, well, I'm not really a good guitar player. I might have said, do you consider yourself a fast player? And I think he said something like, well, I don't, whatever the reason was, he said, I don't pick every note. He said, I might pick one note and then play another 3 or 4 with my left hand. And I went, oh my God, that's what I do. And when I went back and listened to albums like even Van Halen and especially Gary Moore and people like that, and Richie, like Richie did do a lot of vibrato, but a lot of legato, and a lot of vibrato, but he did a lot of legato, and I could hear the speed picking in there as well, the ultimate picking. And I went, oh, I'm dead in the water. I've been doing this wrong. I was like, I knew I'd get this wrong. I didn't take any lessons. I knew I'd get this wrong. And I've been doing it wrong, and I'm a fake, and I'm a fraud, and everyone's going to just run me out of town on a rail because I'm not they all thought I was good, but I'm not. I suck. And then I was reading the cover story interview with Eddie Van Halen and Guitar Player, and he mentioned Alan Holdsworth, and he said he was talking about how much he loved his playing, and he was trying to sort of emulate him. And he said, you've got to get the UK album and listen to In the Dead of Night.
In the Dead of Night, yep.
You've got to get the Bruford album, One of a Kind, and listen to Hell's Bells. And my good mate Bloomy, who ran the record store here in town, he found me the UK album. So I take it home. And first up, I just love that song. It's one of the greatest songs. Fantastic tune.
So good.
I mean, right, it's a great tune. And the minute it got to the solo, I recognized the sound, the legato sound. I went, Alan's not picking every note. That's the sound. That's what I've been doing. And I went, I like this. I like what this guy's doing. And then I realized in that moment, I thought, you should just do what you want to do. There are no rules because he's doing it and he's doing it brilliantly. And Alan could pick every note. Alan was a vicious picker. He just chose not to.
Because there's this song, I think Nevermore, the last song on that album with the acoustic intro where he's playing all this like Demiola style stuff. And it's brilliant.
A lot of that's legato though. But
that wouldn't surprise me.
There's other solos where you can hear him picking. In fact, when he passed away, a lot of people did really wonderful podcasts in tribute to him. And one of them was Jeff Watson. You remember Jeff from Night?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And Jeff was really good friends with him, who didn't live far from Alan, so they'd be drinking buddies. They'd go down to this pub down the road, and Alan played on one of Jeff's albums. And
right.
And he said when Alan was doing those sessions, Jeff said, "Oh, Alan, I'm Steve Morse is coming in next week to play." he said, Alan was sitting there with his guitar, and he said, "Oh, really? I wonder if he'll do something like this." And he played a high-speed picking Steve Morse style solo as a joke. And Jeff just went, you know, it's like,
Yep.
you know, there it is, right? Alan was so much more than even all of us knew who he was. Like, I mean,
because I mean, I can't play that solo, but I've tried many times. He does it on like the E and the G string, where he's doing the big stretchy like E minor arpeggio. It's the beat it lick. It's the beat it lick, like where he's like, it's all hammered on, right?
Yeah.
And I remember seeing a transcription for that, maybe in Guitar Techniques magazine or something, being like, no, you're not allowed to do that. Like, when you go to a new string, you have to pick. And then like the penny dropped. It's like, oh, that's how he's getting that sound. Like, he's not trying so hard. He's actually backing way off on the touch and things like that. And then, like learning Beat It for a gig or something, being like, oh, that's the meme.
Alan's stretch on the instrument was so huge. Like, he could reach so far. But, you know, those fingers came down right on top of the note. Like, I mean, I'm the other way around. I'm the most genetically ungifted person in the universe to play this. This is like a medieval torture device for me. Look at my fingers. Look, they bend the wrong way. I'm deformed, man. So if I'm sitting here like
maybe it's an Aussie thing. Maybe it's a footy thing. Look at that.
Well, yours aren't as bad as mine. Mine bend at the
like
first knuckle.
That's
and if I'm sitting here like this, it's supposed to be here, but I just can't. You know, it's supposed to be like that. I can't get it. So yeah, I've had to figure out a way around the wall. But here's the thing: I did an album with the Planet X guys, Virgil and Derek.
Yep.
And it was called Quantum. And Virgil originally approached me. This was way back in like 2006 or something like that. I think that album was around that time. And he said, "Look, Alan Holdsworth's going to play on this album, but we'd like you to play on a couple of tracks. Would you be up for that?" And I said, "Oh, my God, yeah, the stuff." Give me a hard drive, and I think I did Alien Hip Hop and maybe one other tune. I don't know.
I think I remember buying that on CD when it was like finally available at JB Hi-Fi or Sanity or whatever, you know, because it was just like, you're not allowed to have all these people who can play like this together. It's illegal, you know. But and then it went straight over my, like, you know, 3-chord rock music head. I should go back and revisit it actually, because it's
well, you'd love it now, because I mean, but the saddest part of the story is Virgil kept asking me to do tunes, and I was like, okay. And apparently I ended up doing the entire album. Alan did play on 2 songs, but he was supposed to play on a lot more, but he got really upset with what he'd done and erased it all. And so the tracks were lost. And but anyway, I ended up, it's just me and Alan playing guitars on the album. Nobody else was asked, which is a shame. I would have loved to have heard Tony and Greg on there for sure. But anyway, quite a few years later, it was about 2008, Virgil was invited to go to India by Sandeep Chowdhury, a wonderful person over there who's a real patron of fusion and jazz and a beautiful musician in his own right. Lovely, lovely fella. And Virgil said, "You want to come with me?" He said, we'll play the album we'll have bass and keys on track, but you and I will play live." And I said, "Yeah, sure, let's do it. It'd be great." So to relearn the songs, because I didn't have any of the tracks, so I had to give all the tracks back to Virgil. He sent me stems of the guitars, keys, bass, drums, so I could relearn the songs. And as the good Lord would have it, on the guitar tracks were Alan's solos. And so I've got the 2 solos that Alan did. I've got those here on my computer in just glorious, pristine, on their own, with his amazing reverbs printed around them. And boy, they are just something to behold, man. I mean, he's playing some of the most amazing stuff. And I swear to God, it's like listening to a synthesizer. There is not another string noise. There is not a bump. Nothing. They are pristine.
Wow.
It is inhumanly good and so humanly beautiful in how he plays what he plays. It's just, I mean, I've never heard anything like it. You listen to my solos isolated, and it's like, yeah, there is someone trying to build a shed back there. It's like, there's noise and crap going on everywhere. I'm bumping stuff and squeaking.
Oh, that's
album.
amazing.
Oh my God. Yeah, it's just incredible.
So obviously,
if I'd had these tracks when I was 17, it would have been life changing.
Yeah. So with that, obviously with those kind of guys and you figuring that stuff out, getting to then actually have to go and not just like play it live, you did the pub tour, but that obviously evolved into, with the success of Whispering Jack and Age of Reason, like much, much bigger gigs. How was it scaling all that stuff up to those kind of shows?
The good thing is it was scaled. We started off in pubs, doing pub gigs, and I'd already done that with John the year before, so it wasn't that big of a change for me.
Right.
And of course, everybody else in the band, Angus Birchall was younger than me, but much more experienced. Angus had played in Melbourne a lot, and so everybody had already done their pub trial by fire, so that was okay. Every now and then you might get a slightly bigger gig, which was like an outdoor fair or something, and stuff like that. Maybe it'd be a couple of thousand people instead of a pub gig of maybe 1,000 or 800, something like that. But the real wild card in that tour was they booked all these gigs a long time before they knew the album was going to go ballistic. And Glenn had obviously booked 2 support gigs with Whitney Houston at the Sydney Entertainment Centre. And so the Sydney Ent Centre, I think, held about 8,000. And we had to do that. We did 2 nights. The first night we did the gig with her, then we did a double. We went straight to a pub and did a pub gig.
Wow.
And the next night we got to stay and watch her. And the funny thing was, her and her management must have thought they'd been stitched up completely. Because they'd be like, why would you put the biggest act in the country on before us? Because no one knew it was going to go that way. But You're the Voice came out and the album went nuts and the single went nuts. And by the time John took the stage that night, it was packed to capacity. And we walked out in the dark to go to the stage and they went absolutely apeshit, man. It was like wild. That roar from that crowd. Angus and I still talk about it when we went, once you get that rush first time, you never forget it. Like it's kind of it's just that first time experience of that, and everything else is just a variation of that.
Yep.
And John got an encore both nights, and man, I wouldn't have blamed them if they'd been a bit pissed. And even Angus and I, the first night we wandered into their catering and ate 2 of their meals, and it's pretty good service around here, and 2 of your guys came in and ate 2 of our meals. And
what a stitch up! That's amazing.
Anyway, but the next night I stood there and watched Whitney, and oh man, she was just incredible, absolutely incredible. She would have been like 19 back then,
far out.
And just amazing. Like what a singer, and and a goddess. I was just standing there like, just watching and just thinking, how did I end up here? So anyway, but then it was back to the pubs, and then of course after those tours, then they were like, well, we've got to go out again. This time we're doing bigger places. So we graduated to what's now called John Cain Arena in Melbourne because Rod Laver hadn't been built yet.
Right.
And anything like larger theatres, stuff like that. So, and then after that, I think we went back in the studio after that for 87 and did Age of Reason. And then it just kept getting bigger and bigger to the point where, by the end of 87, I think that's when we did the orchestra tour with the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra.
Right.
And that's when we were doing
guitar intro we have to talk about.
Well, we're doing multiple weeks in like the biggest venues, which was unheard of for an Australian band, that's for sure.
Yeah.
The guitar intro,
it's so cool. And this is, for people who know, it's, how Australians will never let a name or a nickname go wrong. Like this is the Rambo era, right? Where, Can I just sort of tell you how that? Dude, I will never be that cool. I will just say that, like you on that tour, the look, what you're playing, the giant camera on there, so people could get the like POV guitar solo. It's amazing.
I got into powerlifting through my friend Daryl Madden, who I'm still good friends with, and so we were only very young, 17, I suppose, And we really enjoyed it. There was a whole bunch of it. You used to do it, and we'd go to a gym in Bendigo that was run by a world champion up there. And so it was a great environment. We really dug doing it. And it was the 80s, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sly Stallone were all trying to get big and things. And I was a healthy person. I wanted to be fit. So, and as David Hirschfelder's father called me, he said, "You are the man of many tank tops." And he always wore tank tops. And I'm so embarrassed about it now, but I guess I could flaunt back then a little bit. But the funny thing was, we were doing the early Whispering Jack tour, and I was wearing a tank top. Hey, who would have seen that coming? But I'm wearing this tank top, and it was a Mambo brand. Remember Mambo?
Yeah,
tank
I remember
tops?
Mambo.
Of course, yeah.
We're backstage, and Steve Housden from LRB was there, and he was looking at me. He's going, "What's on your tank top, Rambo?" And Farnham heard it and just went, you're Rambo from now on.
Yeah.
So, the crew used to call me Rambet. So, tell them, bastard. But anyway, no respect. I don't get no respect. But anyway, that's where the Rambo thing came from. And so I decided to ham it up a bit and sort of put on a bit of a costume when I went on stage. And I think it was just a way to settle my nerves, like go into character a little bit so I could be up there and not have a friggin' freak out, you know what I mean? So it was just a bit of fun. But anyway, that was that. So I just thought I'd
I will just say, for everyone our age, that is actually, they're just life goals, It's like, get jacked, look great on stage, play ridiculous, and be playing great tunes to lots of people. It's but yeah, that guitar intro, is that something that they came to you and said, "Hey, we need you to do a solo spot kind of thing," and there's the harmonics that you were explaining before. So yeah, give us a brief overview of how that came about.
Ross Fraser, John's producer, Ross Fraser, he said, "Look, for this upcoming tour, because it was in two halves, we had an intermission. John did both halves of the show." Another superhuman feat of strength, and he said, "Look," he said, "you could have a minute and a half." He said, "You can do whatever you want." He said, "It could be in the first half or the second half, electric, acoustic, you figure it out." And so I started thinking about it, and I'd just seen Tommy Emmanuel do the cascading harmonics that he would do, because he just released his album Up From Down Under, and he was touring everywhere and doing the morning shows and everything, and just playing brilliantly. And when he did that, the way he does it, I'd never seen anything like that before, and I loved that sound. And I thought, well, I can't do that. And I thought, is there a way I can mimic that without having to learn that technique? Because I'll never get it done in time. And plus, I didn't want to rip Tommy off. I wanted to try and do something different. So what I came up with was, and bear in mind, this guitar is not set up for it. I had a Yamaha guitar at that time that we had a deal with Yamaha, and they gave me a guitar. And so I set it up so the action was basically a millimeter off the frets for this tapping solo. And what I did was I probably haven't got the best sound for it here, but I held a bass note like that and had the harmonics here. God, I really can't do this. And then I do. I get rid of that and go. So I do a tap and pull off to the harmonic, and then I think I went to these harmonics and went. Sorry. And did that. So, and then the other ones these were harder to do down here. So. And then the last one was, what was it? Something like that, it was a terrible sound for it and everything, but
that's so cool.
But yeah, that was just a little trick I came up with, But it's not original. I think Eddie was doing stuff like that. I just tried to basically take everything Eddie was doing and run with it in a way where I wasn't completely ripping him off. I wasn't just standing there going.
That's like every guitar player of the 80s. No, every guitar player. I was just saying, every guitar player of the 80s that like Leon and I grew up idolizing, they did the exact same thing. It's just everyone's trying to be Eddie, but not be Eddie. Nuno Betancourt, you mentioned him before. Red Beach. It's
Vito.
Vito. Yeah, it's such a cool sound. It's
when I got to LA in '89, one of the very first bands I saw on MTV was Winger.
Yep.
And the first thing I did was recognize Rod Morgenstein from the Dixie Dregs.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
And I thought they were fantastic. I thought Winger were just awesome. I really, and I
Yep.
still do. Kip's a fantastic singer and bass player, and Reb just twisted my head off and put it back on again. I mean, I saw him doing that, and I was like, "What am I doing here?" You know, like, I mean, I should just go home. and then, of course, it was only about a year later I met TJ Helmrich, who was doing the 8-fingered version of all that, and it was like what Jeff Watson was doing. Only TJ had it down. He could play all night like that. And
amazing.
Yeah, so luckily I'd kind of given up tapping by then. So I did the tapping solo through the Nelson tour because the Nelson guys really wanted me to do it, and I was happy to do it. But
well, that's the perfect transition to you, Troy, because this is a moment we've been waiting for on this podcast.
You've got no idea how much I still watch those music videos, those Nelson music videos. It's just all the time.
And not ironically, you actually enjoy them.
I really enjoy them. I mean, they're still a little bit silly, I'll be honest, but I just really like it. And it was weird because at the time that, again, like, you know, Leon and I have known each other for almost 20 years, so we were going through 80s rock stuff in the, late 2000s.
But it was the most uncool thing ever.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
But I feel like now, the way you didn't know that, you know, like a slide or something, that was like, we didn't know that you weren't allowed to like this music, so we just liked it unironically, you know, which is great. And now loads of people our age and younger are just like, oh, great tunes, and they're playing, and have you heard this solo? So it's, you know, it divorced from all the ridicule at the time.
Yeah, and I mean, in regards to Nelson too, because obviously we were one of the most vilified bands of that era, but you know, to our credit, we were one of the few bands that went out and played absolutely live. No tapes, no BVs on tape.
Amazing.
There were not too many big bands around at that time that could make that claim. I got to tell you, a lot of people had keyboard players under the stage or behind a curtain. A lot of BVs on tape. We were one. The only song that had a sequence in it was a ballad called "Time Will Tell," and that's because Paul Merkovich only had 2 hands. He had to sequence the string part so we could play the song, and he played piano. And so everything else absolutely 100% live, and it was a gun band, man. I wouldn't have joined a band full of deros. I mean, you know, I wasn't gonna walk away from, because a lot of them were like, a lot of those bands back then, they were terrible players.
Yep. I listened to
all the good ones, like Danger had Andy Timmons, and we had Enough come out and tour with us on that tour, and they were sensational. Taiketo.
I remember Taiketo, yeah. They were cool.
We went on the same, their manager was also managing Cinderella.
Right. Yeah, cool.
And Cinderella were on their 3rd album, and I have to say, I would watch their show every night, and it was absolutely stunning. And it was so sad to see us in a 20,000-seater with 2,000 people in it. They were just on the downward slide, and it wasn't fair. They'd done their best work, and they were playing great. The songs were great. And Lynch Mob were there as well, but I never got a chance to really talk to George, so that was a shame. I was really shy. I didn't like to go up and talk to people.
It's just funny because all those bands, well, with the exception of Cinderella, have recently toured Australia, like Taiketo. There was a show, we did it last year, called Glamfest, and it was Lynch Mob. Taiketo stole the show. They were phenomenal live. And George, you know, is just one of those, you know, he looked like he'd just walked out of like a city beach, you know, with his kids, like board shorts on, tan, sound check. And just like, he's playing, you know, I think a lot of the guitar nerds were a bit disappointed he didn't have like, you know, one of the ESP Kamikazes or something. He's just playing like an ESP Strat, 3 single coils. He bought his like 68 or 69 Plexi over unattenuated, and that was it. And it was just like, oh, that's the sound. And you would like, there's this, oh man, it was so good. Yeah, Taiketo. But yeah, I mean, as you were saying, with the Winger being a good example, Nelson being a good example, just people who can just play their ass off, you know?
And sing their asses off,
Yeah. Which, a little question I have, you put out a single a couple of years ago that you're singing, and I was just like, you know, I wanted to lean through the screen and just, you know, punch you in the Australian friendly tradition, because also great singing. So was that just a non-negotiable factor where, like, if you were to be in a band back in the day, you had to sing good? Or being around John, being around, you know, being in Nelson, like, did you pick up stuff along the way? Did it come naturally, or was it something you've worked on?
No, it wasn't. it wasn't natural, and it still isn't. Like, I mean, it's hard. You know, I don't sing enough to get the power. You know what I mean? And it's like I can work hard and get a good demo done here at the house. So I don't use auto tune or anything. I just keep singing it until it's right.
Raw dog it.
What I work on a lot is how I pronounce words and phrase things, and that's where most of my effort goes. But I mean, you can't possibly stand next to a singer like John Farnham for 40 years and not have at least have aspirations of upping your game a bit. I mean, the only sad part is that it is an absolutely impossible standard. I mean, every time I open my mouth and try to sing something, it's like trying to pick up an acoustic, having met Tommy Emmanuel. It's like I just put it away and go, "What's the point?" You know, it's like
they're the aliens, right? Holdsworth, Farnham singing, Tommy on acoustic guitar, Tommy on electric guitar as well is a devastating prospect. You know,
Tommy on a drum kit. You know?
Okay.
I mean, yeah, you know, Tommy's a pro drummer. I mean, and what else has he got going on? You know, so I don't know. He probably juggle as well, knowing Tommy. But the night I actually was lucky enough to meet Alan Holdsworth, I'd gone back to America to do some gigs, and it was actually with Rick Fiorabracci and Joel Taylor, and Joel played with Alan, and we'd done it was at the NAMM show. We'd played at the NAMM show, and Rick and I had gone out to dinner with the SWR amp guys who he was endorsing at that time, and they took us out for sushi, and we'd had a few sakis, so I had a little bit of a buzz going on. I was feeling good. And Rick said, "Oh, we should drop in at the Baked Potato because Alan's playing there, and we'll catch the end of the set." And so we walked in the back, and I propped myself at the bar, and unfortunately, Alan would kind of clear the place out because people just couldn't take it. You know, by the end of the set, they were kind of shell shocked. But it was the dream trio. It was Chad Wackerman, Jimmy Johnson, and Alan. And I was sitting there at the bar, and I had a beer, and I was just kind of topping up my night, and I'm just sort of sitting there like this, and Alan's doing that one of those beautiful volume swell intros before a song like Zone or something, and I'm just sitting there going, "What's the point? What's the point? There it is. What's the point?" You know, I'm just ready to sell all my gear and just quit. And then this guy comes up to say hi, and it's Alex Hutchings. You know Alex Hutchings?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, I'd never met Alex before, and he said, "Oh, I recognise you. I'm a big fan." And I was like, "Oh, nice to meet you, Alex." And I had no idea I was talking to this phenomenal musician. And Alex and I are standing there in the middle of the room after Alan's finished playing, and all of a sudden, Alan's head is between us, and he looks at me and he goes, "Sorry," and he looks at Alex and goes, "Sorry." And then he walked around everyone in the venue and apologised to all of them for his performance. And and then Rick said, "I'm going to get Alan to come over and say hi." And so I was still standing near the bar, and he brought Alan over, and I got to meet him, and I was just freaking out, you know, and a little bit tipsy, and just didn't know what to say. And I said, "Have you got any CDs here, Alan?" And he said, "Yeah, I got some." And I said, "I want to buy Flat Tire." And he said, "Oh, you don't want that? There's no guitar on it." Because it's the one he's done entirely on syntax. And I said, "I need it to complete my collection." And I'll just give you one. And I said, "No, you won't. No, get away." And I went over and I gave his girlfriend, who was selling him, $20, got the album, brought it back for him to sign it. By the time I got back to him, he already had a 20 out of his pocket and was trying to give it to me. I was like, no, bugger off.
Yep. Wow.
He signed it for me. Is it down here? I forget where it is. I've got it in a frame. It might be down in the kitchen. And Alex and I went back to chatting, and we noticed Alan's lugging his gear out to his van. And I was like, right, bugger this. Go on, Alex.
Yep.
And he had 2 412 cabs, and I grabbed one, Alex grabbed the other, and we took him out and chucked him in his van for him. And I thought the universe is right. I'm Alan Holdsworth's roadie. You know, don't play, just roadie for the man. You know.
That's how I felt at the guitar show, helping you adjust the noise gate on your thing. I'm like, I've adjusted Brett Garsed's noise gate. My life is complete. I can retire.
I thought I've got the expert right here. I'm going to ask him, and within 10 seconds it was sorted. So.
Oh man,
I've got to get better at adjusting those things from the actual screen. You know what I mean? Like I'm so addicted to the. The
editor is great. It's interesting you mentioned Alex Hutchings, because seeing the way guitar influences flow and get interpreted, guys like Alex, Tom Quayle, Rick Graham, you know, there's this sort of British school of legato mastery, right? Obviously, Holdsworth being in many ways the instigator of that. But all those guys obviously like absolutely glow you up, and I think rightfully, where it's like you're playing almost being like, you know, the human alien interface between that, where I know listening to you, it's like I can hear the rock influence in there, but also the hybrid picking technique that a lot of those guys use from kind of studying your playing. So it's got to be cool where, again, you can walk into a place and see one of your biggest influences and have someone from the other side of the world also, you know, well, again, you may not know that you're both musicians, but you love the same thing, and it's different interpretations of the same thing with this sort of, I don't know, music's kind of cool like that, right?
It is, yeah, that kindred spirit thing.
Yeah.
You know, we all intersect at some place, and I mean, yeah, it's trippy to sort of, like Tom Quayle is about the only person I know that's really just gone, well, I'm a legato player. Like, everybody else will do it, but they've also got the speed picking in their arsenal and all the rest of it, and they're also damn good at it. But Tom can do it too, but he always downplays his picking ability. But
he put up a clip of playing some Paul Gilbert stuff, and I was like, that's disgusting. Of course, you can do that.
He can totally do it, but he always downplays it. But he really proudly states he is a legato player by definition, and he's about the only one I can really think of that says that. And but for him, people like him and Andre Neri,
yep.
You know, I mean, Michael Dolce, like, I mean, players like of that caliber that say I played some role in what they're doing. I mean, that just blows my mind, because I should be taking lessons from them. You know, it's like they're just nuts. But I guess that's evolution, isn't it? You know, the old dog like me has to roll over and nick off and do it. I'm in the process of rolling over and nicking off. I won't go down without a fight. That's all. I'm going down.
Yeah, exactly. Tell us about the guitar you've got in your hands. So this is new. This is potentially a signature model. Can you talk about it?
Well, Charles and I have been talking about this for well over a year, and he just said, I want to build you a guitar. And I wanted to buy a guitar, but he said, no, I want to build you one. So we talked about, I've been playing that, you might be able to see the very bottom of the blue ESP that's hanging there. Played that for a long time. And then when Stuart Fraser became ill and couldn't play with Farnham anymore, I decided to switch back to my old Strat to do some of Stuart's parts and honour those.
Yep.
And Stuart always played his Nags guitar, which was like a Strat. So
great guitars.
I fell in love with playing my old Strat again, which I was so grateful for. And then that's ended up being my main axe for about nearly 8 years, I'd imagine.
Yeah, right.
And the blue ESP was my main guitar for about 8 years. It's like I get set on a guitar and I'm just there. You know what I mean? And so when Charles and I talked about it, I said, well, I'd love to do a hybrid of those two instruments. And because the ESP is a fixed bridge and the Strat being a Strat, and that's really what this guitar is. So, and even down to the color, I probably should have chose a different color, because people, I just love blue guitars. What can I say?
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, it's you, right? And Charles is big on that kind of, like, I feel like he, you know, he's like the Terminator, where he'll watch you play for 30 seconds and he'll be like, I bet you, like, this sort of setup, these kind of specs, this color, you know, he let me borrow this guitar when I was in Sydney doing Club Cabaret, and I was like, you know, he came and saw the show and was like, oh, I bought a guitar down. And I was like, oh, I'll play it tonight, you know, and we're doing the, like, pre-show jam, and I was like, this is it, you know, like, he's like, he knew what I would like. So I often say to him, it's like, you know what I like, just, you know, that's a thing. But yeah, seeing that, for you, obviously the old Strat and that kind of thing, is it a similar thing, like, you know, neck shape, fret radius and that kind of thing? Is it more a vintage style thing? Is it definitely a modern thing? No,
it's a modern thing. I gave him the telly that's hanging there. I sent him up the neck from that.
Oh, cool.
Which is actually, I got a neck for that and the Strat in the late 90s, like 98, 99 or something, off a great luthier in Santa Monica. I was still living in the States, Bill Asher. And I just went in there one day and he said, look, I've got these great blank necks here that John Suhr has cut. This is while John Suhr was still working for Fender.
Wow.
And I said, I'll take two. I'll take one for the telly and one for the Strat. And so I sent him the telly one, and that's basically what this neck is he just sort of mimicked the profile of that. And I wanted to go rosewood fretboard because I haven't had a rosewood fretboard. I mean, that's ebony on the ESP, but all my Strats have just got maple necks by coincidence, and all my Strats, I've got two. You know, like I'm talking like I'm Ingve, and I got a whole room in the house full of them. But yeah, I really wanted to go like a rosewood neck, and this is ethically sourced rosewood. So I do have all the specs written down here.
Yep.
And Charles went stainless steel frets, and I started off with Charles saying I'm thinking of going to a lighter gauge of string. Like, sorry, I can't seem to get my air conditioner settled right, and I'm being a pain. Just bear with me.
No, mate.
And
it's a brutal country. You got to have the aircon on, otherwise suffering.
It's supposed to be 40 today.
And I couldn't decide string gauge, but I think I'm cool now. I was going to try the Paul Gilbert approach of bumping up the action and going to a light gauge. So, because Paul plays a lot of slide now. But I didn't like it. It sort of felt a bit weird. Had sort of basically 9s on these first 3, and then 10 to 52 gauge on the bottom 3. And just yesterday, I thought, you know what, I'm just shoving a set of 10 to 52s back on. We're going to go with it because that's what I was playing for ages on the Strat. I actually had 11s on the Strat a few years back.
Yeah, right.
And, 11 to 52. And I could handle it, but that's when I was playing live a lot and I was match fit. Whereas now, playing in your bedroom or in here ain't going to cut it. It's gigs. That's why the other day, getting up at the Melbourne Guitar Show, I'm afraid the stage is a little bit of an alien environment for me. So, and it's got nothing to do with really standing there playing. It's the intensity of the moment.
Yes, right.
And when I got up there and the sound was bad, we talked about that before we started filming, which I don't think was really anybody's fault. It's just the room and the frequency of the stage and no sound.
It's a conference room, Yeah,
it is what it is. And it's the professionalism is don't freak out, don't freak out, don't freak out. But I kind of was getting close to freaking out because I wanted to play well, and I already knew from the first song that was not going to happen. So I just had to take what I got and just live with it. But anyway, back to the I
put up a short clip from the show, and people were flipping out about it. So it's there's the standards you set for yourself, and there's also the in the moment getting it done. And I feel like you've probably had enough experience just getting it done where that more than got you through. So keep telling us about the axe and the.
Well, just quickly, I just want to say,
Charles put the Callahan bridge on it, which I discovered when I was really trying to get the Strat up and running. And
they're great.
They are really good bridges. I love these things. And so we were nearly going to go with a Floyd, to be honest. And it was the guitar that he sent down that had the reverse headstock that had the Floyd on it. And I was nearly going to go down there, and I thought, no, even the Floyd was a bit of a pain getting in tune. And excuse me. And I thought, oh man, I don't want to go back to carrying a toolkit around with me, And this is pretty stable. Like, considering it's a non-locking system, it's pretty darn stable.
No, and he knows how to set them up.
And he sourced these great knobs, which I think I was watching a clip of. I think it was Guthrie today. I'm going to email. I saw Guthrie the other night with the Aristocrats, and I had a lovely chat to him, and I had to cut it short because my stupid car was parked in a stupid parking garage. I was going to shut at midnight, so I only got it out of there with 3 minutes to spare. I could have talked to Guthrie for 3 hours, and so I'm going to email him and ask him about his guitars. I really wanted to chat to him about those. And I think we might have the same knobs. They're these fantastic knurled knobs that hang on, I'll go back to my other camera so you can see.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Troy? Sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. It's unrelated.
These great little, if I can get them in close enough.
Yes.
See the little knurled knobs with the numbers on them. So
I see. Yeah.
And the little pointers, like on say the SG or something.
Yes.
And I sort of asked Charles to do that because. And they glow in the dark, so it's just really.
Oh, how good's that? It's funny though. When I was in Sydney last year, I was there for about 9 weeks, so I went to his place as much as possible to just bug him. And I'd taken my old 335, and it was like missing a few knobs and stuff like that. And the input jack needed to be changed. So I was like, man, there's no way I can do this in my hotel room. He's like, bring it down. And he looked at me, he's like, do you want some more knobs? And he sort of like opened up this drawer. And I've never seen a collection of every variation. Like,
yeah, right, yeah.
But also, a bunch of them, he was like, yeah, it looks like it's an impressive collection of things he sourced, but so many of them go to 11, which I love. Like, he's obviously found a custom, like the ones, I mean, you know, for a very like, you know, sophisticated looking guitar, I probably can't get in. The knobs go to 11, which I'm like, yeah, this is why it's for me, sort of thing. So, was the guitar with the Floyd, was that the sort of, I think he calls it the Renegade series, where it's like the Swamp Ash with the sort of bluey wash?
That's it. That's the one, yeah.
Yes.
And I actually considered that paint job for a while because I thought it was so unique.
Yeah.
So you sort of put gouges in the guitar and then sanded it off. So, and but I just thought, I'm a little old to be playing a guitar like that. I think this is more befitting of a gentleman of my vintage.
And so the rest of your rig.
It's an old trick too. When you're old and ugly, you get a beautiful guitar, and that deflects. So it's like,
it works when you're young and ugly too. So trust me.
Well, yeah, mate. Believe me. When you got a single eyebrow like me, you just need a lot of good-looking guitars. And the rest of the rig, how long have you been using Fractal stuff? Because I feel like when I got a Fractal rig, it was sort of, you know, you were one of the people I was aware of that was doing the thing with them, using the FM9 Live, right?
Oh, yeah. I remember getting the Exp 2 sent to me back in 2008.
Wow.
No, 2010, I'm sorry, 2010, because I remember I was still recording Dark Matter, and it came by the house, and we were living in another place we were renting, and of course I did the worst possible thing where I just went through the presets, and I didn't like it.
Yeah.
So I sent it down the road to the next person I was sending it to, and then in the end, I think Andrew said, I'm going to send you another one of these, and this time live with it.
Yeah.
And I really did, and in the end, it just became the thing. And I ended up doing so many albums with it, and then of course he was kind enough to get me the Exp 3, and I made that transition, and the same thing has happened. This is it. Like, I've got my Cilia preset, I've got the Strat preset, and especially after the pandemic, you know, all the when especially when John Farnham got cancer, we stopped doing any live gigs with John, and he's still okay, thank God.
Yeah.
But I don't think it'll be a while before he comes out again and plays, if ever again. I don't know. That's up to John, but I don't know where he stands on that. I mean, I'll always keep my fingers crossed, but live gigs for me have pretty much evaporated. So this is my universe now, staring at the cameras and doing this sort of thing. And this thing is just invaluable. Any time of day or night, I've got everything at my fingertips. It's awesome. So, I mean, and the FM9, I just basically did this strange thing where I ported the preset from this to it, modified it to suit this guitar, and then ended up putting that preset back onto this. So, yeah, it's back and forth. So,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
I actually did the same thing because I've been using the FM9 Live for so long. I built a preset and I was like, this is pretty close to where it needs to be. And then I was like, I'll just bump it back on the axe in the studio. And yeah, that's 95% of my life now. What are you using amp, cab, effect-wise in there?
You know, it's a total coincidence, but I went through everything. Believe me, I went through every amp in this thing. And for my main distortion sort of sound, I'm using the Euro Blue, which is a Bogner, basically.
Bogner, yeah, awesome.
And my favourite amp was a Bogner. I bought Alan Hines' Bogner. I don't know if anyone knows who Hines is.
Speaking of monster players.
Exactly, yeah. So I bought an amp off a monster player. Must have had a bit of Alan's mojo left in it. He almost didn't sell it to me. I had to wave that cash in front of him. And,
yeah.
I don't know if I want to sell it now. Come on, Alan, look at the greenbacks, you know.
Yeah.
And so I ran out the door with it. But I had to sell it because we were building this house, unfortunately. I sold it, it was a long time ago now. So, back in about 2012 or 2011. Right. And I just thought, I'll just get another one. And, of course, our dollar is just down here somewhere now. So the Bogner would probably cost me $10,000. So I'll never get a Bogner. So, but I got this anyway. I don't need a Bogner. I got nowhere to use it. So that's that. But I ended up on the Euro Blue. And the cabinet, back in the days of the Exp 2, they used to give you the updates, but they give you IRs. They just give you a whole big IRs. Remember those days? Yeah. And I went through hundreds, and I found this one Marshall 412 box, and I went, that sounds like a mic'd up cabinet to me. And, you know, if you've stood in front of if you've heard enough mic'd up cabinets like I have in studios, you know what one sounds like when you hear it. And I've just used it ever since. And there's others in there that are just as good, but this will do. You know, it's the same thing. So I even use it when I have a clean sound. I'll use like a super reverb or something like that, or a twin, Fender twin, and I still use the same box. You know, I rarely change the cab. Sort of thing.
I think that's probably the most salient piece of advice. You're using a modeler, find the cab IR that is you, and then that's you. Like, don't change it. You know, it's just everything. It's the same way, like, you know, you got a guitar that you love, and it's, you know, clearly a blue super strat vibe with a blue amp. It just works, right? And you're sort of like, cool, I can. That seems to be the main takeaway from listening to, you know, when you were 13 to now. It's like, just you're actually allowed to be yourself.
Well, essentially, that sound is me trying to get as close to the sound that came out of that Marshall all those years ago.
Right.
Like, I'll never forget it. I listen to the old cassettes I've got over there, and the playing is just awful. But boy, that guitar sound is good, man. It's a good tone.
Yeah.
So, you know,
that's amazing.
Yeah, that's what it is. And I just run standard effects, just standard reverbs and stuff. The only anomaly I have, I'll just move my pedals a bit closer, is this big ambient reverb that I like, and you hear it here. The delay is on my my DSP thing. I'll turn that off. So you hear that there's just reverb there, so nothing here. But if I push the pedal down and go, you get that. So it's one of the quad delays in there, or the you know, whatever those things are they have in the.
There's a plex and the multi-tap and those kind of things. Because
that's what it is.
I did see you working that quite a bit at the guitar show. Is that what? Are you just using the volume pedal to bring that on for leads and big pads?
Well, so the thing that's different about it, and I've discovered this back in the 90s when I was using a Digitech IPS 33B, if you've ever heard of those things.
Dude, I've been trying to find one of those. What's the Satriani song that he used it on?
He still uses it, doesn't he? Yeah. And he said it's terrible.
Because of that thing that he uses it for, it's in that, like... It's in like the Edge and the SDD 3000. You're like, okay, it's a cool unit. It sounds good and it's got the preamp, but, you know, should it be $4,000 used? No.
Mine's still out in the shed. You know, it's just the trouble is it only runs on 110 because I bought it in America stuff.
Yeah, right.
But it's still out there, and they were so ahead of that. They were like the highly affordable version of an Eventide H3000. They would do amazing things, custom harmonies, whammy pedals, and it did this, which was it attaches the volume pedal not to the actual volume, but the input signal. So that way you can have that pad and you can go...
Beautiful.
Play over it. And if I had a really long repeat on that, I could, which I have done in the past, I've used it as a pad where you could go...
And then...
Yeah, you can be your own keyboard player in a way, you know, and it's like a really
the dream.
I always wanted to introduce it to Andy Summers. You probably tell me to piss off, but that's because you could do the whole. You know, you could.
There it is. Yeah.
At the same time, because I've seen Andy do it live, and he's sort of got to make a bit of a compromise where he either plays the rhythm part or the big thing. But it's a great effect. And I remember I was watching Andy Timmons demonstrate a Strymon pedal, and he had a very similar thing going on. And I thought, I got to get me one of those Strymon pedals. And I looked it up, and it was about $700 for just that pedal. And then I looked at this thing and went, there's about 10 of them in there. So bang for your buck. I mean, you know, you get people don't realize how much you get in a Fractal unit. So
the thing I like about it is, you know, depending on your previous experience, you know, if you're coming to it from a traditional rig, a non-fractal rig, basically, depending on your previous experience, like you're like, I had this thing back in the day. I wonder if I can do it. I can do it on there. Or I'll do the same thing. And, you know, I'm very guilty of this where it's like I get a pedal come through to demo. I'm like, whoa, it does this thing. The first thing I do is like got to make the Fractal do that, and like how close can I get? Which
Right,
is,
right.
you know, I like that it's. I'm sure sort of back in the day it was like, you know, if you had an 80A MP1, you sounded like everyone else who had an 80A MP1. Whereas now it's like so many people have a Fractal, but they still kind of sound like themselves or whatever else you're using. There's that transparency there.
Guthrie was pulling some amazing sounds out of it the other night, you know, let alone the violin. We won't even go there, but just a lot of the ambient sounds he was using, like, because he is the primary harmonic instrument in the Aristocrat. So he's covering all that sort of sonic space, and he did it beautifully. Like, it was really good. And the thing that frustrates me is when I talk to people who are like, "I'm a real amp guy, man." It's like, well, aren't we all, mate? You know, the thing that drives me mad is. The thing that drives me mad is they're like, "Oh, it doesn't sound like my amp." And I'm like, "And what exactly does your amp sound like? Have you ever mic'd it up before?"
Yep.
"No, I just used it on pub gigs." And then they set it up in a pub, and they don't tilt it, they don't angle it. They sit it on the floor, so the only people that hear it are the front row who are going like that.
Yep.
"Oh, my amp sounds awesome, bruh." And it's because they aren't hearing it. You know, your ears aren't in your knees, mate. You got to mic them up. If they mic it, you mic a big amp up, close mic it, and listen to it in a room, in a studio. That's what it sounds like, you know.
Yep.
This is close mic'd. They hear their amp reverberating around a room. It's like you are hearing the room.
Yep.
You're hearing your amp in a space. It's like, that's not your amp, that's the space. And it's like,
it's the
You
movie.
need to put that on a t-shirt. I love real amps, don't we all?
well, I've been through that because I came from nothing but either hearing my amp in a tiny pub or hearing my amp in a big hall and going, "Gee, it sounds different in here, so much better." And then hearing my amp in that big hall and then putting it in a professional studio and having them shove a 57 in front of it and going, "Sounds this big." So
it's kind of weird. It feels like the only place you don't compromise your tone is when you're sitting in your bedroom playing by yourself. Because, you know, the amount of gigs I've done, like you were explaining at the guitar show, I can't hear anything. I have tink, 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 the quietest guitar sound in the back because otherwise managers come out and yell at me. Or I'm in the studio and I'm only experiencing or recording other people in the studio here. They're only hearing it out of the out of the studio monitors. It's just like
out of the monitors. Yeah.
The tone, the cork sniffer tone snobs. Like, it's all you can see. I love amps and they're wicked fun, but yeah, it's just the only time I can really feel that it's too loud to listen to anyway. I've got to wear freaking earplugs as well because
right.
And I do that occasionally. I was saying that to Leon the other day.
It is just that mind spin out when you hear your amp close mic'd and you walk into the studio and go, "What happened to my sound? That's not my sound." It's like, it is your sound. But then we get to the other thing where it's mic placement. And we all know, like, on the cone, just off the cone, between the paper and the cone, angling towards the paper or angling towards the cone. Like, the slightest difference makes a big difference in EQ, the slightest movement.
Yep.
And that's what Jimmy Page and people like that worked with back in the day. They used mic placement to change EQ. They didn't use EQ. And that's why when we were doing the Red Hot Summer tours with Farnham, like, John always headlined. He was always the last act. And we never saw the stage sometimes until we walked on to play the first song. That was it. We never got line checks. We never got sound checks. We just walked on, picked up our axes and went for it. So if I was using rented backline and a pedal board, I guarantee I would have spent the first 4 songs with my back to the audience going like this, you know. Back then I was using the Axe-8. I took the Axe-8 up there. We plugged it in stereo. Matt English, my tech, plugged it in. Grant Walsh out the front got the same thing every gig. Adam, our monitor guy, got the same thing every gig. I got the same thing every gig out of the stereo wedges. You know, it was the most sensible setup to have. And every now and then, "Well, you're using a real amp, man." And it's like, well, settle down, son, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
So,
No, I still use.
It's like, "Oh, dude, a real amp! I never thought of that. I've only been doing this for 40 years." You know, it's like, oh, give me a break. You know, there's method to the madness. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, I think a lot of times people look at a guy like me and think I'd be old school, and I am. I love amps. I mean, please, you know, I want to go to Nerdville and hang out with Joe Bonamassa for a week.
Oh, yeah.
But when you look at practicality and what works in certain situations, you got to use that. I like people that use both. So.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's so cool. You were going to say,
no,
Sean?
you go. You go.
Oh, I was just going to say, you've got a book now, right? On hybrid picking. You've got some more stuff coming out. Tell us about that, because I'm very, very curious to how that came about. And obviously, people like ourselves are super curious about how you do what you do. Has it been fun sitting down and figuring out how you would impart that information onto someone who's maybe got very limited experience with it?
Yeah, it's Luke Lewis at Guitar Vivo in the UK. He approached me about doing a book. Some other guys asked me about it, and we were talking about it, and the real hindrance was me transcribing it, because I can't do that. I'm not trained in that area. I don't know anything about that. And Luke said, "Don't worry about that. We'll get around that." So, because he sort of rebroached the subject, and we decided to do the hybrid picking thing. And at first he said, "Let's do 100 hybrid picking exercises." And I was like, "I've got 5. I haven't got 100. You know? And I said, "How's this?" I said, "How about we do 50 exercises, and I'll do 50 musical examples of how you might use that exercise."
Wow, yep.
And so it was a lot of work. I mean, I had to come up with a wide variety of sort of things. I'd use mainly my own songs as backing tracks and things like that. And then I had to sort of try and structure it, starting with basically the pick and this finger, then the pick and this finger, and eventually way up the dusty end of the book, you get the pick and these 3 fingers. Because if I'd started with that, people would have said, "Oh no," you know. So,
yep.
So, and it was really interesting, and to sort of look at the lineage of it and go, well, okay, well, if I was really learning this from scratch, what would I do? Because I can't remember how I learned it. Like,
yep.
I just remember playing, and then one day when I saw Frank Gambale's instructional video back in 1989, I was just mesmerized by what Frank was doing, and I went, could I do it? And with my fingers, and it worked. So a lot of it I owe to Frank. I mean, it's his genius that I sort of stole and appropriated and put the hybrid picking stuff to. So I try to give him props whenever I can, because that's the truth.
Is that the video where he's playing the yellow Ibanez?
Yeah, it's the very first one.
Yeah.
I think it's called
Monster Licks and Speed Picking.
Yeah.
I love that song, Leave Ozone Alone. I listen to that a lot.
Right. I like the
think
first tune a lot too.
Yeah,
So,
but I don't think that I haven't been able to find that on streaming, unfortunately. So YouTube's the only place I can listen to that stuff. But
right,
yeah, it's been a little while.
But it's the thing that mesmerized me with Frank's approach was him sweep picking small groupings like 2 strings and 3 strings, whereas all the metal guys were doing all 6.
Yep.
Which is still fantastic, and Frank certainly can do that. But I sort of thought that looks a lot more difficult to sort of limit the sweep to such small grouping. Like, you would need serious accuracy to pull that off. And that's exactly what I was kind of, it set me up just great, you know, because it's easy for me to sort of sit between smaller groupings of strings. So the weirdest I'm working on right now as we speak, I was recording videos this morning for a Legato book. And that's the more challenging one, only because my legato approach is just a little different. Like, I pick a lot more notes than people might realize. So, but I have to try and convey what legato technique is as we guitar players understand it.
Yes.
And sort of try and go across every subject. Like, there's the Satch way, where you sort of keep your finger anchored like that, and then there's the slightly more Allen way, where he sort of raises his fingers off and has a more floating sort of approach with his hand. So there's a lot of different ways to do it, and I'm not an expert on all of them, but I have to try and convey those different approaches. It's and I'm not a systemized guy. I grew up playing in pubs, you know, like, I mean, this stuff just sort of all just stumbled along, me bumping into ideas and bouncing off them and then bouncing off me. So it's not like I've got a thesis written out or anything.
It's almost like you said at the start, where it's like, you know, you go to watch your friends play footy, and next thing you've got to throw your kit on and like just jump into a game. I feel like the uniqueness of Australia, and it's still for Troy and I growing up, we still do a lot of just pub gigs where, you know, it's not like playing bars, say, in the States, or, you know, smaller venues in Europe. It's like, it's still got there's this like texture to how you do the gig and what you can and can't get away with. And sometimes, you know, most of the time you know what to expect, and other times it's just like there's the oh shit moment of like, all right, we're doing that. I'm going to have to figure out a way that isn't terrible, that sort of works, where it's like, hey, you're playing full forward today, mate. Get in there. You're like,
That's
okay,
right,
yeah. Let's try.
In this little town I'm in, which is near Castlemaine, it's pretty much the city. But back when I was a kid, there was about 5,000 people in it. There's a lot more now. It's a very trendy place to live. But back then there was only about 5,000 people in it, but at least 4 pubs, and every pub had bands in them Friday and Saturday night.
Wow.
It was the 70s into the 80s. It was just awesome. And so, we were between here and another city called Daylesford. We were playing city. Was it like a town? It's another trendy place now, very, very upmarket. But back then it was like Dodge City, man. It was just crazy. I remember we were packing up my cousin's ute. We were packing up the gear in the back of that so his dad could drive us home. And it was about 2 a.m, and the streets were completely empty. And we heard this clopping sound, and we just stood there, and a big steer with big horns like that just went right up the main street. Just kind of looked at us as it walked past and just took off, and we went Daylesford. So anyway, but yeah, that whole era when we were doing that, disco had just happened. And we're playing Going Home, we're playing Purple Haze and the instrumental from Woodstock. Every Deep Purple song we could possibly think of. We did the live version of Strange Kind of Woman with the guitar vocal duet in the middle. It was hilarious. Space Truckin' and multiple Hendrix songs. Like I mean Rainbow songs. I mean, people by and large hated us. I mean, they were like, we want to hear Staying Alive and I Go to Rio and nothing against those songs. I love those songs, but we couldn't play them. And guys yelling at play I Go to Rio. And I said, do you see maracas and a keyboard up here, man? It's like, come on. It's like, so anyway, we just had this one night at Daylesford where these 4 guys sat in front of us at a table, and we thought, God, here it comes. We'll probably get a pot chucked at us in a minute. And we started playing Starstruck by Rainbow.
Yep.
And they lost their shit. They went completely mad. We played Man on the Silver Mountain, got every song we played. And they were the only people that ever came to see us in our 10-year career that knew all that stuff. It was heaven. So
that's why you do it, though. Like those moments where like someone knows like the stuff that you're super into, right?
We've had that. Leon, I feel like we've had a gig like that, haven't we? Like where someone heard a King's X song and like, oh, you played King's X?
Yeah,
I'm sure we did a gig like that once. There was something weird.
I remember
when I first went to the States, Over My Head was getting a lot of airplay on MTV over there. And I remember that was 89, I think. And I remember just seeing that going, who are these guys then?
Yeah, here we go. Here we go.
They never got anywhere near the credit they were due, those guys.
Yeah.
We found...
It's just funny because it's...
I was going to say, Leon and I were at a guitar shop around the corner from here yesterday, and we found the Ty Tabor Strat that he played, the Strat Elite, in the same color. And I've never seen one of those before, ever. So incredible. This close to dropping a lot of money on another guitar that I don't need.
Didn't he use like a Lab Series amp or something?
Series,
Weird like that?
It was broken as well, and a quadriverb. Oh no, a MIDI verb. MIDI verb 1, I think it was. Yeah. Some silly rig, but it was a cool sound.
Great player. Great singer. What a singer Doug Pinnick is, man.
Yep.
And this is the thing, it's like the Freemasonry of music. If you know who King's X are, you're in the club.
That's it. Yeah.
And you see a guy. I think when was that? I think maybe we opened for Living Colour, and there was a guy in the audience in a King's X shirt, and I like clocked him while we were doing the opening slot, and I was like, all right, got to try extra hard to make this guy happy, And after the show, we like found him, and I was like, person in a King's X shirt, we're friends. And he was like, oh my God. Like, I was just like, yeah. So our set was like, just like a B- version of all those songs. Because and similar bands like, again, they just very unorthodox yet super inspiring as well. So glad you brought that up.
They're an inspiration for you guys with Ragdoll?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you've heard any of our stuff, right, you're just like, oh, cool, yeah, there you go. This is someone who grew up listening to Ty Tabor.
I've heard a lot of your stuff, but the good thing is I don't think King's X, and that means...
Okay, good.
You're not too close to him at all. But
I've now ruined it for you, so...
Yeah, basically...
But, trio, singing bass player...
Yeah, and because I'm involved with all of that too, in terms of like being, no, do it again. Do it more like King's X. So it's been like, unfortunately, that influence, and then it sounds the way it does. A lot of the song titles, the the pre-finished song titles have some sort of King's X name in them, which is quite funny.
The working titles.
The working titles.
Yeah, I think the last batch of songs we did, there was a song which was King's Triple X and another one which was King 69 because
that was
there's probably a King's BPM. 420.
Yeah, there was a 69 BPM though, so that was why.
Yeah. Oh man.
Anyway, that's silly.
Brett, you've been so generous with your time, mate. It's like actually, it's been amazing to have this chat. And before we finish up, where can people find you if they want to buy your music, buy your instructional material, buy you, I don't know, a beer or a coffee? How can they do that?
Well, both my albums are on Bandcamp. That's probably a good place to find them because you can get the high-res versions from there, I think. And guitarvivo.com, that's just guitar, VIVO, is where you get the book. And with the book, you also get a link which gives you all the videos. So
amazing.
That's how we do it these days. So it's like it's a book. You can either get it in PDF or hardcover, which is the hardcover I've got back there. But you can get a PDF of it, and either way, you get the download link, so you get all the video material as well. So it's a really cool way of doing it.
Fantastic.
That's about it, really. I mean, my poor old instructional DVD. You can actually get that. I've uploaded some of the instructional content and the live footage from that to Gumroad. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
great.
Gumroad. So, yeah, you can even get that from there. So I'm pretty easy to find.
I'll chuck links to all this in the video description so people can, fill up your beer glass or your coffee cup, whatever it is. And what's next for you over, say, the rest of 2025?
Look, at this stage, like most years, it's a blank calendar at the moment, so I'm just waiting to see what's going on. But I do have a lot of stuff to do for Guitar Vivos, so that definitely is going to keep me busy. This is going to be a big year of doing that stuff, and I love it too. I love working here from the studio, and it's like I said, gigs are great, but only if you've got control over the environment. So. So when we did the Jeff Beck gig last year at Bird's Basement with Paul and the gang, it was great fun because we had control of that environment. We could sound check.
That clip of Beck's Bolero is phenomenal. Like the band's cooking, the guitar sounds are amazing. I think you put it up recently. It's one of those. I don't know if you guys are the same, but you can hear a song 1,000 times. By the original artist, you listen to the recording, but it's not until you see someone else get within spitting distance of that original vibe where you have, like, for me, I have if I see, what's his name, Daryl Gabell, who I'm sure you're aware of, him playing City Nights is like, okay, he's nailing it, and that's superhuman. But also my appreciation for Holdsworth, I didn't know it could get any higher. You're just like, the original guy who did this and brought this out of the ether, that's, oh my God, now that I've seen someone else do it, it's a cool. So yeah, the Beck's Bolero thing is like, I've heard that side part a lot because I love that, but it's like, hearing it's like, this is the connection to the genius, right?
It was the first, that night on the gig I think it was the first time I'd ever tried to do the octaves live. So it was a bit of a leap of faith, but I thought, let's go for it.
Let's do it. Yeah, phenomenal. Troy, before we go, any last questions?
I think I'm good. That was awesome conversation. So no, I'm good, man. Thank you again for doing it. We really appreciate it.
Awesome. No, thanks for having me, fellas. God, my pleasure.
No, absolutely our pleasure, Brett. We will see you all on the next one. Go and check out some of Brett's music and his instructional material, and go back in time on YouTube and check out. I mean, just go and listen to the guitar solo in "Let Me Out." I'll just put it there. If you think it's just a bunch of Aussie larrikins hanging out, it is. But go and check that out. And we'll have to do it again in the future, Brett, because this was an absolute pleasure, mate. Thank you for your time, and all the best.
Thanks, guys.